Are you trying to do something specific in Streamerbot, but the documents feel kind of like a maze and you get lost in it? Or do you even know what I'm talking about and you don't know what the docs are? Well, today I'm going to show you a repeatable way to go from your idea to the right information to your working action all in one video. So what exactly does Docs.Streamer.bot have in it? Well, essentially it's the manual. It is everything you're going to need to know to create whatever it is you're trying to create. And what I'm going to show you is how you go from your idea to finding the trigger and what arguments it gives you, going to figuring out how you're going to set up the action based on that, how to test it and make sure you're doing it correctly, and then going even further. So let's go ahead and let's start diving in to how we can make this easier for you to get through. So when you open Streamerbot version 1, you're going to see actually that there is the documentation right there for you to click on. And when you click on it, it brings you straight to that website. So we've already made this much easier for you to get to. So let's just do a quick overview of the documentation to give you an idea. On Get Started, it gives you the information on what it is, how to install it, your initial setup, and some basic examples that you can use in the FAQ. In the guide, it's gonna go ahead and tell you what everything is and how to understand it and go from there. There's a lot of information to read, so we're gonna go ahead and skip this, let you read it on your own. But the main thing you're gonna wind up going to is where it says API. This is where everything's broken down into the sub-actions, triggers, C# methods if you do programming, if you're going to filter things through a WebSocket server, an HTTP server, or a UDP server. These are more advanced options. Most people won't use this unless you're going to be doing C# methods and actually doing some C# programming in Streamerbot. So ideally, really, if you're new to this, you're going to be sticking with sub-actions and triggers. So if we were to click triggers, for example, you're going to see that it breaks down everything into little categories. So here, this is the core category, which is referring to anything that if you were to add a trigger from core, it's gonna go through all of these different things here. For instance, if you were setting up something like a shoutout command, you would do command triggered. And in command triggered, it's gonna come up with the information to kind of let you know what's there. But when you come down to where it says variables, it breaks things down to variables that you will be able to have access to in order to make your action happen the way you want. Don't be intimidated by variables. This is simply the blank spot on your Mad Libs. It's the best way I can really think of it. So instead of you filling in the Mad Libs, what you're doing is telling Streamerbot, you get to fill in the Mad Lib. You get to tell us what's going in this spot. And what you're telling it to do is fill it in with the information from this one specific thing. Now, that can be something that is determined by Twitch, or it's something determined by YouTube, or something determined by really actions that are happening in Streamerbot. It's really dependent on how you're needing this to fire off and work. But variables are the thing that you're going to use to make Streamerbot really do anything you need it to do, including making your own customized alerts, or celebrating when a hype train happens, or really just combining things together. I mean, your possibilities really are near endless. So when we look at something like commands being triggered, what you're gonna see is all these variables coming up. So if you have where command triggered is the triggering thing, and it can be any command that you have put together, this is all the stuff that's gonna be available to you. And it's broken down into different categories. So there is command triggered, which is basically if it's just a command of any sort, can come from anywhere, this is what's going to come in. What you're probably going to want to focus on for something like a shout out would be input pound. Now what this means is essentially the word that comes after the command input, you're grabbing whatever somebody puts in the chat to bring into your existing actions. So using the shout out example, you would do exclamation SO, and then whatever would follow is your input number, which input 0 is the very first word entered into that command. So if you did exclamation SO and shouted me out and put the exclamation SO OSUPhoenix, it's going to take OSUPhoenix and put that into whatever you need to use it for within your sub actions. This is how you can create a shout out very easily. But even with that, you can take other information with that. Like if you were to put OSUPhoenix Twitch, then you would use input 0 as the name. Input 1 would then be, hey, the platform we just described. So you can actually break it down to give yourself more information if you want it. But then you have something like raw input, which is the entire message. Everything that's entered after that command is triggered. So in this case, if you had a trigger that you capture somebody's entire message to put it up on the screen, like you're doing a questionnaire or something like that, the raw input captures the entire message and brings that information into the one variable. That way, you can take whatever is being said and put it to what you need to within the sub-actions. But further beyond that, you have where you can click up here where it says API reference, and you can scroll to whatever it is you're needing. So if you wanted something that's triggered by kick, here's everything that's triggered by kick when it comes to the trigger section. You can do it by channel, chat, emotes, general. There's all sorts of information that you can get depending on what trigger you want to use based on what you need it to do. And then when it comes to the sub-actions are pretty much the same thing. So if I was to come down to Twitch and I wanted to create a clip from Twitch, you can come down here and see what variables are available to you to use when you trigger that clip. Now, when it comes to the sub-actions, you need to make sure that your sub-action is first, and then whatever's drawing the variable information comes after it, which would be below it in the list. So in this case, if you wanted to use the URL and you wanted to save it somehow, first you need to save the clip. Once that clip has been saved and that has been triggered, then that variable is accessible to you. So it's very important to have all this information available to you, which is why I recommend having the documents up on the screen, readily available to you whenever you're creating something new. Now, how do you fit this into your routine of making things? Well, that's where you just simply have to know what you want to achieve, and then you get the information you need based on what you're using. Now, I know that might sound a little confusing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So, for an example, let's go ahead and build a happy birthday widget where somebody sets their birthday, we save that information, and then every time they come in and chat, we get to celebrate their birthday. If that is the same day, it's their birthday. So let me just reset our browser to home, bring up my Streamerbot, and let's go ahead and create our birthday action. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to be able to set a person's birthday based on what they enter in chat. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, hit add, and we're going to call this set birthday, and we'll call this birthday. Now me, when it comes to queues, I like to make sure that I put things in different queues. Now with something like this, I don't think I need to have it held up by anything else. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it under my no blocking queue, where nothing gets restricted. It'll immediately fire when it happens. Okay, so we have the action, but we have nothing else to it. Okay, so the question is then, how are we going to bring in the information of that person's birthday and save it? So the first thing we have to think about is, what would be the best way for them to save it? Do we use like Twitch channel points? Well, do you really want somebody to have to spend points on setting their birthday? Probably not. So what about a command? Hey, we can make our own commands. Let's go for that. So we know we're going to do a command. So we'll right click, go to add. Commands are in core right here with commands, and we'll do command triggered. And we don't have one yet, so we're going to create a command. I'm going to call this set birthday to make sure I know what this belongs to. And the command name is going to be !birthday. I'm going to go ahead and put this with all my other chat commands that anybody can use to trigger various things. And on the sources, I want to make sure that I get it from Twitch messages, YouTube messages, Kick messages, and Trovo messages. I want to get it from all those different platforms, all the ones I'm streaming from. And now I hit OK, and now I've got that command triggered in here. So this is where I would use the Streamerbot documentation to tell me what do I need to use next. Because I know that I'm triggering the command, but how do I need to capture the information that somebody puts in the message? So we're going to go into our documentation. So let's go ahead and go to triggers, and we went to core, commands, and command triggered. So like I showed earlier, this is every variable. This is every variable that is available to you to use to fill in whatever you need this command to do. Now, all I'm looking for is to just capture the birthday information, capture the date that they were born, and that's it. Well, I'm not going to use input because maybe they put it in a different way, or maybe Streamerbot might not recognize a slash or a dash as all-inclusive, and maybe it separates them by that. I don't know exactly what it's going to do, so I'm just going to be safer on this, and we're going to do raw input. So here it shows raw input. That's what we're going to use. So in order to save the date and make sure it stays in Streamerbot forever and applies to only the person and not everyone, we're going to use the global variables. Now, if you've never heard of global variables or it's something very intimidating to you, don't worry, I've got a video that really goes into a lot of depth on global variables, how to use them to create very complex things or even really simplistic things like I'm showing now. And you can use that to then expand on how you want to take care of whatever it is you're trying to build. We're going to go to core, we're going to go to globals, and we're going to do global set, which is essentially saying we are going to make a variable of our own that we can either save permanently or temporarily. And so in here, I'm not going to save it global because that means everyone gets access to it. That's not what I want. But for a redeemer, the person who triggers the chat command, that's what I want to use this for. Now I'm going to save the variable name as my birthday. In here, you have value, increment, and decrement. What we're going to do is actually do value. And because of what we have in our documentation, we have raw input. So that is the variable we want to use. So to enter that very simply, what we would do is add %, raw input, %. Now, this is the part where a lot of people wind up getting into a little bit of trouble. And a lot of that is due to the fact that there is a very specific way that you have to input these kinds of variables. You have to make sure when you input a variable or recalling a variable or anything like that, you have to make sure that your spelling and capitalization is exact to whatever it is set at. So whatever it is in the documentation is what you need to use when it comes to using that variable. The % on either side of it is to indicate to Streamerbot that this is a variable we want to use, and this variable should be populated based on what we're using already. This is like a child. You have to explain everything one thing at a time, otherwise it's not going to do what you want. And most of the time, kids don't do what you want anyway. But I mean, that's a whole different argument that I'm going to deal with later. Freaking kids not wanting to eat dinner. So now that we have this set, we're going to capture the raw input. We're going to save it by the person who redeems it, and it will stay. And now we have that. So this is all I really needed for this command. So now we have a way that we can save someone's birthday. We have set up a command. We've used the variable that command gives us per the documentation. Now we need to be able to use that information anytime we want to check to see if it's their birthday yet. And we have to figure out how we're going to make this part work. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out how do I determine when we figure out when their birthday is. And for me, I think the easiest thing would be, well, what's the first words they say when they come into the stream? Because if they come in and they say something, I want to wish them a happy birthday immediately. So we're going to go ahead and go with first words said in that stream. So now I'm going to add a second action. I'm going to call this check for birthday. I will put this in the same queue as my other where there is no blocking. Now, we already know that I wanted to use a trigger of first words. So I would need to do first words for each one of my streams that I'm getting this information from. So Twitch, first words. And if I wanted to do a specific user and not everybody, I could fill it in, but that's not what I'm gonna do. But I also need to add it for YouTube, for Kick, and so I'm gonna go ahead and add those in as well. There we go. So I have it for all the 4 that are currently supported with Streamerbot. So the first thing we need to do then is to say, well, what is their birthday? We know we have it saved. How do we get that? Well, this is where we'd go to add core, go to the globals, and as I said before, we would want to do a global get. Oh no, I have no idea what any of this means, so what do I do? And this is where a lot of people would get confused because it doesn't blatantly tell you exactly what you should be inputting, And it can get very confusing because you're seeing where you have variable name and destination variable. What's the difference between the two? If you go into the documentation and we go to our sub actions and we go to globals, global get, and here is all the information on doing a global get, where we're fetching the information we have stored and retrieving it for this action. And when you come down, there's an explanation here. So variable name is enter the name of the variable you would like to fetch. So the variable we are trying to fetch or go get is saved within Streamerbot. Well, we saved it as my birthday. That is what we saved it as in our global set. And so what we're going to do on variable name is we're going to put that in there. My birthday, exactly how I had spelled it. But next now we have destination variable. What does that mean? In the documentation we have that the destination variable, enter the name of the local argument you would like to populate. And some of you might be going, huh? Destination variable is simply saying, what do you refer to this variable for this specific action that you're using? And the reason this is set up this way is because you can actually use the same global variable for multiple different things. But if you have all those things firing off at the same time and they're all labeled the same way, Streamerbot's going to get confused, it'll crash, it'll give you garbage. So when it comes to the destination variable, destination just means for this specific action, this is henceforth what it's going to be known as. And I'm just going to put it as B-Day. And I'm going to do it all lowercase. So my March 1st birthday. Now you all know. Yay. Yeah, don't come bug me.
I'm an old man. I don't like to be bothered on my birthday.
And then destination variable, we are setting that March 1st as here is that information for this action only to be used only in here. Default value. Well, a default value is essentially saying, if it can't find anything, what do you put in its place? So in the default value, what I would do is for something like this, no birthday set. I can put something like that to where if it was to pop up and say anything, then, or I need to go look, it's going to show me, the birthday hasn't been set. That's the reason why it's not wishing you a happy birthday. You know, I can look and find that information in the global variables as you do in that tab and search that person's name. You will see that information pop up then. So the next thing I'm thinking is, okay, well, how am I going to determine, you know, if it's their birthday or not? So for this next part, this doesn't actually exist within Streamerbot's documentation, at least not that I found. How to get the date into your arguments and be able to say what is today, there is a way you can do that, and I'm going to show you how. So what we would do in here to basically say what is today, bring that information in, we would right click, go to add, core, and we're going to set an argument. So in here, the variable name, date, and the value, this is what's not going to be in Streamerbot, but what would you would put to get the date you want entered in here, which is today's date, you would put date, semicolon, or colon, capital MM/DD, and then put your parentheses. This is like calling upon your computer system and saying, I need what today's date is in a format of month and day. That is it. So with this value, you will be able to say, bring in today's current date. So we then can compare that person's birthday with today's date. So we put that in, and now we've got our birthday and we've got today's date. Now, in order to check these, we're going to do an add, core, logic, and my favorite, and I use this often, is if else. On the input, we are going to check B-Day. So the B-Day we had put in when calling in our global get, that's what we're referring to. So global get value, B-Day. That, if that equals, and we had set date, today's date, we had named it just date. So if the B-Day equals the date, and those are matching and the same, then we can do our wish somebody a happy birthday and throw balloons all over the screen or whatever you want to do. So when I press OK on this, you now get a true and a false. True means yes, it is somebody's birthday. False means no, it's not. Forget it. So under the true result, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send an announcement to the channel letting people know it's someone's birthday. So I'll come up to chat and I'm going to do send announcement to channel. And this is just the Twitch side. I still have to add YouTube, Kick, and Trovo. And in here, I want to wish the person a happy birthday. Okay, well, how do we know that, we can tell the person specifically, like, happy birthday? How do we know? We didn't pull anything, did we? Actually, you did, because if you go back into the triggers, you'll be able to get the person who triggered it. Their first words will trigger it, and you will get the variables from it if you look in the documentation. So if I go in and I do trigger, we're going to go down to Twitch. Here's the Twitch triggers. I know it was in chat, and here's first words. Now it says docs needed, but I'll be honest with you, even though this isn't filled in, what we're after is going to be the same as chat message. And what you're going to be looking for is Twitch user variables, basically the person who triggered this. And what we're looking for is right here, the display name of the user. So this is the variable we need to use, is the user. So now in our message, I can do happy birthday to user, and we can just leave it at that. So now it'll say happy birthday to the person whose birthday it is, and I'll hit OK. So if it is their birthday, it's going to wish that person a happy birthday. If not, well, you don't need to do anything else. But if you wanted to make sure that this is canceled out after, checking, then you can always do an add core, the logic, and this is where break has gone. And break is one of the most important things I use. So break essentially is just saying, if the result is this and you hit break, it's going to stop everything with that particular action. So if you had more that you wanted to have go after it, you wanted to build all sorts of other things into this and have multiple actions and didn't want to put it all under the true result, you can just put that break in the false and it'll stop everything from happening below that. And this is one of the key things I use to make sure that whatever I'm building that uses logic, that if it's this, cool, we continue with it. If not, we stop immediately and we don't go any further. Break is one of my favorite things to use when it comes to Streamerbot and using the logic. Now, do note that when I added this in, it did not go into the false result because it shows nothing. So I actually have to grab this and drag it up like that to the false result. Now it's in there, and now I can build how I want, and it's not going to just stop every time. So always make sure that your action count here is going to be accurate. Now it's time to test it. So first I'm going to do birthday, and we will put it for today's date to test it. Okay. So I've got some of my first word things popping up and some of my other stuff because this is my main build. Now the problem is, since I'm testing this, I've already entered today's date. Well, now I've already used my first words. Now it can't trigger anymore. So for testing purposes only, since all of these are first words and we've already used the first words, well, now I can't make it work. So I'm going to do instead is just add this in for testing, is go to chat and just do chat message. So anytime a Twitch chat message is then entered, it's going to run this action. So really what I want to make sure is that it's going to trigger saying happy birthday to me because today should be my birthday. So if I come in here and say hello, it did not work. So now since it didn't work, I'm going to go look at my variables. It's because I didn't use the right command because it's not in here. So what did I use? Oh, it was just birthday, dummy. Okay, so let me do this correctly then. Birthday, we're going to say is today's date. When you do month, day, you need to make sure that people put in the 0 if it's, not a double-digit month, because that's the way Streamerbot's going to read this for this specific example. Okay, so now that should be set. Now if I say hello, it's still not working. I messed up somewhere, I think. And here's what I'm talking about is you can make mistakes. I forgot to change this to look for the Redeemer birthday. Not just anybody's birthday, the Redeemer's birthday. That's the reason why it wasn't working. It didn't know what variable to get. But I did set the birthday correct, right? My birthday is there. Okay, now it should get me, my birthday, bring that in, and now it should be able to work. So now when I come in here and say hello, did it not send the announcement? Again, I keep making mistakes here. I forgot to put the % for the value. I forgot to tell it it's a variable. Don't look for the word, look for the variable. So go me. I forgot to do it in both of these. Now it should work, right? Hey, there it is. it said happy birthday to me. Yay! And see, even somebody experienced can mess this up and make mistakes. That's okay, as long as you look back and you realize the mistakes you were making. I totally forgot to add the percent signs to tell Streamerbot that we're working with variables, not the words, the variables. But the key thing here is that you're able to integrate using the documentation, flipping through all these variables you have and figuring out which ones you need to use. Then from that documentation, being able to synthesize that into your sub-actions, into your overall action, and build numerous things. And that's where it leads me to things that get incredibly complex, where this is all just one entire widget, but this was all done, well, mainly without using code. There were certain things I had to use code for, but in order to know what I needed to do, I needed to make sure I was checking this documentation all the time, setting arguments, remembering those arguments. And so the more you become familiar with the documentation and the more you build it into the process of you making things in Streamerbot, the easier that it will become to make more complex, more interesting, and more amazing things. But with that, my friends, I am going to take off. I've got more things to take care of, such as building more Streamerbot actions for all of you that you can get through my shop. And, well, you know, I got streams to do, videos to make, lots of different things. So I gotta get to it. You all have a wonderful time. Hope you build this into your process easily. Take care.